I'm from the Matthew 18 group. I thank you for joining us today. I am standing in front of one of the oldest churches in Texas again. I stood before it at the beginning of the month, and today on October 31st I am standing in front of it again. Here to remind you that it was exactly 500 years ago that Martin Luther stood in front of a church and nailed his 95 Theses on the door, calling out corruption in the church, calling out evil in the church. It was 70 years ago this month that the Kinsey Institute was established at Indiana University, and it was based on the man Alfred Kinsey. Alfred Kinsey did his sex studies in the 1930s and 40s, and what he declared is that children are sexual from birth. How he obtained his studies is what is the most alarming. He interviewed pedophiles who had raped hundreds of children, and that is how he came up with the conclusion that children were sexual from birth. From that, we have the development of sex education, because if children are sexual from birth, they need to understand and be able to handle their sexuality. Then it was 50 years ago that, ironically, the Lutheran Church, that cropped out of Martin Luther, the Lutheran Church developed the first Christian sex education program, and sadly it was developed based on the science of Alfred Kinsey. They actually quote his statistics in the original series. So, as I am sharing with you today, it was 20 years ago this month. There's a lot of significant things that have happened this month, but 20 years ago that I was asked to do my first presentation. I was asked to serve on a curriculum review committee at the Lutheran school where my son was attending, and this was the sex education curriculum, and it was of course the largest committee because it would be the most controversial. And in that room there were 25 individuals, mainly parents, but there were also teachers, as well as the pastor, head pastor of the church, the principal. There were probably 7 men in the room, and the rest were all women. What was so interesting is when I went up to get up and speak, because I had done the research, I found that I knew just a thimble of what I know now, but I found that the Lutheran Church had used Kinsey to develop the Lutheran sex ed program they were using in that Lutheran school. So when I went to stand up and speak, I had a 15-minute talk, and I felt like I was being choked. And I thought to myself, okay, I'm a public speaker, so I know it's not nerves, I'm not sick, and it dawned on me this is spiritual warfare. This is an important message that has to get out. So despite that, I said I may sound like a fool, but I'm going to get this out. And so coughing and choking and sputtering, it left me about 2/3 of the way through. But the thing that struck me while I was giving that presentation is a majority of the men had their head bowed. And I had seen that before when my husband had confronted someone in a group setting and did not name names, but the individual that was the guilty party bowed their heads. And I realized that the pornography industry had compromised our men. And I looked at them and I said, gentlemen, we need you. We need you for protection. So do not bow your heads. I need you in this battle. So as I did this, I realized this is bigger, because not only is it in the Lutheran Church, it's in all churches. Kinsey's science has been used in the area of sex education and sexuality. So it dawned on me, Lord, oh my gosh, parents believe sex education is okay. How do I wake up the world? So God is amazing, because when He calls you to do a task, He will equip you for that task. So how do I alert globally? I argued with God. I said, I am not an expert in Alfred Kinsey. And the Lord put in my lap, literally, Judith Reisman, who is the #1 expert on Kinsey in the world, as well as Eunice Ray, who is the founder of RSVP America, which is Restoring Social Virtue and Purity to America. I said, Lord, I'm not an expert. I'm not a biblical scholar. I'm not a pastor. And He put the author of the Song of Songs commentary in my path, so I was able to use him as a resource. Then I said, Lord, the laws had to be changed, because it was against the law. It was considered molesting a minor with immoral intent to even say the word sexual intercourse in a classroom. Those laws were changed using Kinsey's science, so I'm not an expert in law. Not only... Okay. Sorry. A little interruption, sorry. Not only he gave me Colonel Ron Ray, who was not only a constitutional lawyer, but who was a former assistant to the Secretary of Defense under the Reagan administration. And he said to me, he said, Audrey, we live in Deborah times. He said, because of the pornography industry, many men have been compromised. He said it may take the women to get the purity movement going, but the men will come on board, but it's going to take the women to get it going. So, great encourager to me. I want you to know that sex education was intended to sexualize kids. It was intended to prepare kids to be abused by adults, but there was an even bigger plan behind sex education. I want to read to you, this is a book, Raping Our Children, by Gloria Lentz. It was written in 1972. Gloria was actually a reporter who had children and then was a stay-at-home mom. But remember, I had said in the original video that sex education was officially put into the schools in 1964 through an organization called SIECUS, which is Sex Information Education Council of the United States. So from 1964 to 1972, Gloria started to see some alarming things happen. She started to do the research behind sex education. She started to peel back that onion. She got to SIECUS. She didn't get beyond SIECUS, which was to Alfred Kinsey, but she was able to share some very alarming things. And I want to read to you just one excerpt of what she found is the bigger plan behind sex education. She said, if you're just the least bit upset about what sex education has produced so far, think what sex education will be like in the next 10 or 20 years with the churches rapidly embracing the new sexual mores. I suppose if enough religious leaders throw out the Bible, the Ten Commandments, and their own convictions, the prophecy in one of the sex education movies will doubtless materialize, and the children will get the message. By the year 2000, there will be no more organized religion. I hope that by now you are asking yourself why such a comment on religion appears in a sex education movie. I'll leave you to puzzle that one out for yourself. The same movie, incidentally, which is part of the Time of Your Life series, also tells children that fathers will no longer have any authority in the home. So if we look at the state of America today, if we look at the state of the family and the state of the church today, we realize that the plan was to deconstruct the family. And if we look at where families were in the 1950s to where families are today, we are not intact. We are broken. When we look to the fact that this was a plan to destroy the church, I'll give you the example of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod in 1958 had 85,000 infants that they baptized. In 2014, they only had 24,000. We see articles upon article upon article that is talking about how the church is shrinking. So how successful has sex education been? I want to thank those of you who have reached out to me, who have shared how you're struggling and trying to wake up people, how you're trying to protect your kids. I love the headline that somebody sent me yesterday, Parents Force School District to Halt Planned Parenthood Sex Education Program. Yes, that's what you have to do, parents. You have to fight for your kids. This is a very evil force. So what can you do? I am asking you to opt your kids out of the sex education programs. Go to those parent preview nights. I used to be a sex educator. I used to run those parent preview nights. We would have maybe 2 or 3 parents that would show up out of an entire school. You have to get actively involved. You have to know what your child is going to be exposed to. And then I will warn you, in those parent preview movies, if you think to yourself, my gosh, this is too much for my child to have, you're right. It is too much for them to have. And if you speak out, they're going to remind you, well, there's very few people that speak out, and most everybody goes through it, so you might as well let your kid go through it. I'm warning you. Secondly, you need to get on school boards. Planned Parenthood is planting people on school boards to promote a curricula that is promoting sexual activity among children, promoting abortion, promoting the LGBTQ agenda. So again, get on those school boards. And ultimately, I'm asking even a bigger goal, a bigger something to do, which is pull your kids out of the school, because it is pouring into every single subject now that they are going to be indoctrinated. So, and I want to warn you, you may also have to confront someone in the church. You may have to confront a church leader or a pastor if you see that they are promoting very graphic stuff. But again, remember, God will equip you for the task. So in the spirit of Martin Luther, who stood against evil in the church, I want to say now is the time for a sex education reformation. My name is Audrey Warner, and I'm with the Matthew 18 group. Thank you for listening.